everyone. Welcome to Location Planning and Analysis. End of the presentation. Some key objectives for this particular chapter. Identify some of the main reasons organizations need to make location decisions. Explain why location decisions are important. Discuss the options that are available for location decisions. Give examples of the major factors that affect location decisions. Outline the decision process for making these kinds of decisions. And then finally, we'll take a quick look at some of the techniques used to solve typical problems. Location decisions arise for a variety of reasons. It could be the addition of new facilities, such as, marketing strategy to expand markets. You could also have growth that can't be satisfied by existing facilities. It could be a shift in the market. For example, I've seen a lot of Chase banks, they'll move, maybe they were in one particular location for years. And then, maybe as the neighborhood has gone down and they have less people using their banks, or less people may have with deposits coming into their banks, they'll close one particular location and open up another somewhere else. And sometimes the cost of doing business at a particular location makes relocation attractive. So if the rent keeps going up, and you have a store, and they keep raising the rent on you, it's gonna eat into your profits. And at some point you'll have to just make the decision, hey, it's not working out, so I'm just gonna move on. Location decisions are closely tied to an organization's strategies, where they want to be focused on low cost, but you want to be convenient enough to attract market share and gain customers. It represents a long-term commitment of resources, especially if you're going to sign a lease for the space. It also impacts your investment requirements, how much money you're going to invest in the business, your operating costs, revenues, and operations. Comes back again, profitability is very important. You have to be making money, or you have to be making a profit to justify whatever rental space you have. You also have to look at the competitive advantage and importance to supply chains. Supply chains are especially important if you are if you're a manufacturing facility, or even if you're just a retail store, you're importing products, let's say from China or somewhere in Asia, then definitely supply chain is even more important. I was just thinking about, let's say, a supermarket, even so you're not importing anything, but you're sourcing locally or sourcing, within the country, then definitely supply chain is important, because you don't want it to take 10 days or a week for you to get fresh produce. So that's the role supply chain would play there, especially when selecting where you want to be located. Location decisions, I've spoken about this before, but profit potential or cost and customer service, finding a number of acceptable locations from which to choose, position in the supply chain, meaning, are you at the end of the supply chain? Are you customer facing? Are you at the middle where you want to be close to your suppliers or markets? Or are you at the beginning where you want to be close to the source of raw materials? Web-based organizations are less location dependent, but they too don't want to spend too much time trying to move their products around the country just to get close to their customers. So they might not be dependent on one particular location, but then they'll also give some thought, though, to location of warehouses. Supply chain management must address supply chain configuration, such as the number and location of suppliers, production facility, warehouses, and distribution centers. Existing companies generally have 4 options available in location planning. So expanding a new facility, adding new locations, shutting down one location to move to another, and sometimes doing nothing. When you're thinking about going global, because everybody, you want to grow, you want to be able to tap into different customer bases. Two key factors have contributed to the attractiveness of globalization. Have trade agreements, such as NAFTA, which is under attack. There are also general agreement on tariffs, U.S.-China Trade Relations Act, another thing that's under attack, right? And all the different trade organizations and trade relationships around the world made it attractive, because Let's say you're producing in Mexico, then you didn't have to pay tariffs to bring your products into the US. Okay, and the trucks are free to move, across the borders, obviously with, the right papers and that kind of thing. But there's still a freedom of movement of trade. Cheap labor in Mexico makes it attractive as opposed to producing here in the US. Technology has also made it easier for you to operate globally, because you don't have to fly to different countries anymore. You just have voice over IP, so it's cheaper phone calls, and you can actually video chat with someone in another country. Some of the benefits are you have access to markets, cost savings from a labor perspective usually, legal and regulatory, financial, maybe you get a tax break, to operate in a particular area. There are a number of disadvantages, of course, such as transportation costs. If you produce in China, you have to import your products back here to the US. You have to wait 6 weeks on average, anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks to get your products. And if there is a strike on the wharf, then you're in even more trouble. You have security costs. I've heard situations where, people trucking their products, having their products trucked from Mexico here to the US, that the truck gets lost. Things fall off the truck accidentally. So you're taking a risk because there's a high incident of theft, especially with the drug cartels in Mexico. Everybody's could hijack your stuff. So it's very risky sometimes. But once again, if you factor in labor costs and things like that, it might make it still more attractive. You have the risk of unskilled labor. I've thought about Jamaica, where we have call centers, in what they call free zones. So, companies will come down and, try to hire people. But before call centers became big, most of the population didn't know what it was like to work in a call center. So it took some time for them to come in and train them and ramp up production and ramp up offering good customer service, because the talent wasn't there. So that's something you have to factor in when you're thinking about moving globally. Import restrictions, we've spoken about tariffs, and then criticism for locating out of country, that you're firing American people to go and start a company elsewhere. Some of the risk, political instability and unrest. Venezuela is a good example of that. You don't want to start a company in Venezuela because the government can actually come in and seize your facilities and decide it's state-owned. Terrorism is a big issue if you're thinking of operating in the Middle East. Economic instability, legal regulation, ethical considerations when you think about all the bribes you might have to pay, and cultural differences. So a good example here, it's here in the US, people or workers or employees, if you tell them do something, the culture is you're supposed to go and do it right away. Okay, there's no delay, there's no let me think about it, there's no I'm dragging my feet, you go and get it done. That's the expectation. But in the Caribbean, we're a little bit more laid back, and we're like, yeah, man, no problem, man, and you're gonna get it done, but you're gonna get it done maybe on your own time, or when the deadline is, and you'll get it done by the deadline. But Americans like to see it actually moving, whereas we're a bit more laid back. So if you want to set up operations in the Caribbean, you have to understand the dynamic, that we're not lazy, we just work differently. Managerial operations as well for global operations. So I spoke already about the language and cultural differences. Corruption in some countries might be normal, where it's just not accepted here in the US. There's a lot of corporate training on not accepting bribes or, giving any bribes. You could have increased travel, which is not a problem for me. I love to travel. But increased travel where you have to go maybe once a quarter to check on your operations and make sure everything is working properly. You have challenges associated with managing far-flung operations. If you're, listen, things can break in the middle of the night, or night here, but day in China. Let's say you're operating in China. It's a 12-hour time difference. Something breaks down on the production line and somebody needs to talk to you. You're sleeping. So that this issue has to wait several hours before there's any kind of resolution or any kind of attention being given to it. Could have technological issues, and some people just don't want to relocate, even if it's temporary. So the general procedure in choosing a location. First, you have to decide on the criteria to use for evaluating For evaluating the location or location alternatives, identify the key factors, things that are important to you. Develop location alternatives, evaluate the alternatives, and then make a decision. Once again, things to consider: the government. What's their policy on foreign ownership of production facilities, any kind of trade restrictions or currency restrictions, cultural differences, customer differences. Some customers prefer to buy local. So if, for example, McDonald's doesn't work in Jamaica, I don't think there's a McDonald's facility or McDonald's restaurant because, McDonald's didn't want to use local beef. And Jamaicans just decided that, we don't want American beef, we want local beef. It tastes different, it tastes better. And because they wanted to have a standardized approach, they couldn't survive in Jamaica. So those things are things you have to keep in mind. Labor, is the staff trained, or will you be able to find well-trained staff, and are they educated? What's their work ethic? Are they, do they like to steal? Do they like to strike for any reason? Wage rates, how much cheaper or more affordable is it for you to operate there than elsewhere? Resources such as availability of raw materials, energy, transportation, and infrastructure. One thing the Caribbean is famous for is power outages. Here in the US, we never have a power outage unless maybe there's a storm. But in Jamaica, with no warning, and I'm sure elsewhere in the Caribbean, the power will go out. How does your business run without power? We also have technological issues, market, and safety issues or concerns. So in terms of the most attractive countries for operating globally, it's Switzerland, Singapore, US, Finland, Germany, Japan, and so on at the top. In terms of corruption, the least corrupt is Denmark. The USA is number 16 on the list, and Russia is actually considered one of the most corrupt, with scoring 29 out of 100 points. When you're thinking of a particular region, you want to consider the location of raw materials. Do you need raw materials? Are they necessary? Are they perishable? What are the transportation costs for bringing items to you? Location of markets. As part of a profit-oriented competitive strategy, how close is it for you to get the volume that you need? Labor factors, we spoke about this already. Cost of labor, availability of suitably skilled workers, labor productivity, do they like to take a lot of breaks? Do they need a midday siesta? Climate and taxes are also important. In a particular community, there's look a little bit more at other rules or criteria. So, it has to be a good fit for your business. If you think about the restaurant assignment you had or have, it has to be a good fit. The quality of life is important, for your workers and also for your customers. Services that are being offered in the area, the attitudes towards business, any kind of environmental regulations, and development support. Primary site location considerations are land, transportation, zoning, and other restrictions. If you're thinking about having a plant, you need to have a plant strategy. Where do you want the plant to be located relative to your market? I think we'll skip that a bit. Some companies choose to cluster, right? Because it's actually it makes it easier for them to attract customers if they're all together. So if you think about Orlando is the home of theme parks, right? So Disney is there, SeaWorld is there, Universal Studios is also there. I'm sure there are other theme parks. I think there's a Christian theme park there as well, right? It's the perfect right? So the climate makes it a good attraction, or makes it attractive. Plus, a lot of tourists in the area and inexpensive labor. So theme parks would want to locate in that area because then the traffic is going to come. You just have to make sure it's a nice attraction. Electronics firms tend to cluster in North Mexico. Computer and hardware manufacturers cluster in Taiwan. If you think about fast food chains, sorry, such as Wendy's, McDonald's, Burger King, they're all usually within a mile of each other. In New York, they're within a block of each other, sometimes on the same block. And what it does is it stimulates food sales, and you have high traffic flows. Aircraft companies are all in Wichita, Kansas. I actually think a lot of them are in Seattle as well. I could be wrong, but I think so. And if you also think about like San Francisco for tech companies, right? They're clustering because all the talent is there and the venture capital, the money is there. So they're going to cluster and try to stay together. And then, of course, footwear, outdoor wear is in Oregon. So Nike, Patagonia, a couple other companies are in that area. There are several common techniques for calculating or evaluating location alternatives. You have your locational cost volume profit analysis, factor rating, transportation model, and the center of gravity method. So let's talk about the locational cost profit volume analysis. It's all about how do I minimize my cost, right? You have a business, so let's talk about it for a little bit. And then, I'll take you through the math. Let's talk about it. So let's say you decide you want to open up a store in Manhattan. Or right there in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is just fine. Okay, you want to go to Dumbo. And the costs. Do I need to do anything else? No. Okay. The monthly rent is $8,000 per month. So at a minimum, right, you need to sell $8,000 worth of stuff. Let's say you're going to open a restaurant. At a minimum, you need to sell $8,000 worth of food each month to cover the rent. Then you have labor, and that's, let's say, another $5,000 per month. So total so far is $13,000 per month at a minimum. Your profit objective, right, because you have to make some money, so you factored in labor, rent. Let's assume you're not paying anything to Con Ed, which is a lie, but let's assume you're not paying anything to Con Ed. But you want $5,000 in profit, so that's another $5,000. So your total for the month minimum needs to be $18,000 in revenue. Okay? Just so you can cover your rent, you can cover your labor cost. Oops. That was a delay. Hold on. Right, you can cover your labor costs, and you can cover your profit. So at a minimum, you need to sell $18,000 worth of food each month. So now let's assume that each customer only spends $30 per visit. Okay? Oops. Each customer only spends $30 per visit. So then, how many people need to come in the door each month? And the number of people represents the volume piece of the component. So it's $18,000 per month divided by $30 per customer. So you need to have 600 customers spending an average of $30 per month in order to generate total sales of $18,000. Is that possible? Right? So when you're evaluating an area, one of the big questions is am I going to get enough foot traffic in the door that will help me, accomplish my goal? You might get the 600 customers per month coming in the door, but let's say they only want to spend $15, right? It's a lower income area, and they don't want to spend $30 per person on a meal. They only want to spend $15. That's not a good location for you because you're not going to hit your objective of $18,000 per month. So that's how you have to look at it. What are the expenses you have? What's your total revenue that you need to hit in order to accomplish your goals? And then back into it and figure out how much volume do you need, right? So how much volume do you need in order to accomplish your financial objectives? The formula that this approach uses is total cost is equal to fixed cost plus the variable cost per unit times the quantity or volume of output that you need. And there are several examples here which you can go through on your own. Try and determine, what's the best location. Here it is. If we stop a little bit, for example, C, it says that let me hide that. All right, for location C, it says your fixed cost is here. Oops. Right, so fixed cost is $150,000. The variable cost is $20 per unit. Okay, but in order to afford this location, you only need to sell 5,000 units of whatever product it is you're selling. So your fixed costs are $150. Your variable cost per unit is a little high at $20,000, right? To let's say serve a meal, it costs you $20, but you only need 5,000 customers in order to cover your costs. For location A, your fixed cost is $250,000. Your variable cost, the cost to produce each meal, is $11, but then you need 11,000 customers in order to 11,000 customers in order to cover your costs and to reap a profit. So which one is more attractive? Is it the lower fixed cost with the higher variable cost, or is it the higher fixed cost with the lower variable cost? It all comes back to the quantity. So whichever one uses less quantity or the lower quantity, then that's the one you're going to go with. So in this case, you would select location C. Okay. The next approach is the factor rating approach. Right? It's a general approach where you look at all the different criteria and you assume a weight. So the weight tells you how important something is to you. Right? You assume a particular weight for each location. Or you assign a particular weight to each location. And the weights the weight should sum to 1. So let me take you through the example. So if here it says a photo processing company intends to open a new branch store. The following table contains information on 2 potential locations, which is better. So the proximity to the existing store gets a weight of 0.1, meaning it's the least important thing, right? Existing source, 0.1 for a photo processing company. It's not that important to be close to the source location. Traffic volume, not that important because you're just processing photos. You can go somewhere else to go and get customers to take your pictures, I guess. I'm not sure why that's such a low score. But anyway, rental costs, top, right? Your top concern or your most important concern, that gets a weight of 0.4. The size is 0.1, the layout is 0.2, operating cost is 0.1, 1.5, and together they all sum up to 1. So if you were to look at alternative 1 or location 1, it said in terms of proximity to existing source, it got a score of 100 out of 100, meaning it's very close to your existing source. Location 2 gets a score out of 60. If you go down of 60 out of 100, if you move down to rental cost, that has a weight of 0.4. Location 1 got a score of 70. But location 2 got a score of 90, meaning the rent is better or more affordable than location 1. So then how do you put all of this together? What you do is you evaluate each location independently and then sum the weighted numbers, and whichever has the highest weight or the highest score at the end, that's the location you go with. So proximity to existing source is 0.1 times the 100 to give you a score of 10 for location 1. And then the same 0.1 times the 60 to give you a score of 6 for location 2. Traffic volume, they got equal ratings, so they both got 4 points there. Rental it's 70 times 0.4 to give you 28. And then for location 2, it's 90 times 0.4 and so on. When you add up all the costs, all the weights, location 1 scored 70.6. Whereas location 2 scored 82.7. So you go with location too, because it scores higher based on the factors that are important to you. If you chose to change your weights here, okay, if you once you change the weights, then the entire relationship will change, and the weight location 2 might not be the true choice. So it's up to you to decide what's important to you as you select your locations. This is another example. So when you're looking at a service and retail location, right, nearness to raw materials is not always a consideration, but it might be for some restaurants, right? You want fresh produce, so nearness to raw materials. Customer access is prime, okay? Is it easy for customers to access your location? If people can come easily, or they have to make U-turns in order to get to you, or you're on a hill somewhere, or it's going to take 10 minutes or 10 hours or an hour for them to get to you, you're not going to be a good choice for like fast food. But people don't want to go too far to get fast food. But maybe if it's a high-end restaurant, they'll probably travel a little bit further. Not important. Customer access for a restaurant is number one. Okay. Other factors are, really focus on profits. So they're going to look at demographics, competition, traffic, volume patterns, and convenience. And then finally, clusters. So the big thing, let's go back. They're also going to look at profit. Am I going to get enough volume? Does the demographic, will those people purchase my items? What does competition look like? Is there enough foot traffic coming that will bring people into the door? Is it a convenient location? And then clustering, are there other businesses, similar businesses near me that will bring people? So that means I have ready-made traffic. They will also look at the purchasing power, the service and image, compatibility with the demographics of the customer in the area, competition, quality of the competition, meaning, you might have competition, but if they're shabby and their place is dirty and you're going to come with a nicer restaurant, good pricing, then you don't necessarily have to worry too much about competition, right? Quality of the competition is important. Uniqueness of what you're offering compared to your competitor. And if kind of physical quality, maybe that you're going to look at, as I mentioned before, whether or not you're nice and clean. And then how easy is it to find good managers? When you're thinking about businesses, there are two slightly approaches are slightly different. For a service retail company, they're revenue focused, whereas a goods producing company is more cost focused. So I'm a producer. I'm going to look for the cheapest cost, right? Transportation costs, my shipment costs, my labor costs, all of that. I'm going to try and have lower costs and try and find a low cost area. That's going to be my most important criteria. Whereas as a restaurant, for me, it's all about the volume and the revenue. How much will each customer spend? How many customers do I think I'll be able to get in the door? What does the competition look like? And then, of course, you have to consider rent and so on. But usually if you're going to get the foot traffic to accomplish your goals, then rent becomes secondary. But you have to consider that as upfront. And I think that this talks a little bit about how a particular hotel went about selecting their location. So, and then there are other additional examples. So that's it for choosing the right location. Have a good day.